Okay, so Eddie Hearn's put out this interview with IFL and he addresses the Joshua Buatsi situation. He says that, as I mentioned in the video I did about it, he doesn't like overbidding for fights. He doesn't like paying more for a fight than he thinks it's actually worth. But he says he sometimes does do that. And I'll come on to that again in just a second. But he also kind of left the door open for Buatsi to fight somebody else, possibly even Callum Smith, or maybe a different opponent. He didn't seem 100% committed to Buatsi going ahead with this Jean Pascal fight on a Frank Warren show. He said that he understands the game and he wanted to win the bid, but again, didn't want to bid more than he thinks the fight is worth. Now, there was some casual, and that's what he is a casual, in the comments, who was all tee-heeing, saying, Hatman says that sometimes you have to take a loss on a show. Like, I wouldn't want this guy running my business. This idiot, casual, not understanding how boxing works. Eddie Hearn himself, and he says so in this interview, has gone into certain shows knowing that he's going to make a loss, but he's gone through the show anyway. By his own admission in this interview, he has overbid for fights at certain points. Now, why do promoters do this? Because it's an investment. This is a common practice in boxing where you'll overbid for fights, where you know you're going to make a loss. I mean, even in other industries, you look at companies like Uber, various companies. When they first start out, they're making huge losses because they're trying to make inroads into the market. That's why they're hemorrhaging all this money, because they're trying to undercut their competition or undermine the competition by doing that. Okay, now with boxing, a fighter is, let's say, similar to a stock in the sense that when you pay whatever, let's say $1,000 for a share or a stock, you're not going to get the money back right away. So your bank account is £1,000 down when you purchase that stock, right? But what you're hoping for is for that stock to appreciate in value over time, somewhere down the line. And that's when you'll make your money back. Same thing with a fighter. You may think that the fighter is going to appreciate in his commercial value over time, but in the short term, you're going to have to invest money. You're going to have to lose money on shows because you're trying to build his profile, because you're having to pay money to get opponents to fight him. And sometimes these opponents can be expensive, but you're investing in his future, and you're investing in your future with him because you want to get a return down the line. And in certain instances, you want your fighter to get home advantage. You won't want him to go overseas and fight in the other guy's backyard because the decision might not go his way. You don't want to risk something like that happening. So you'll say, you know what, let me just take a loss on the show, make sure he gets the opportunity, and it's in his next fight or 2-3 fights after that I'm going to profit. So Eddie Hearn has admitted to going in. I think there was a Callum Smith show that he said beforehand, we're going to lose money on this show. But I had to go ahead because Callum Smith needs to get out. And obviously he needs to keep his fighters happy. Promoters have contracts with their fighters whereby they don't always have contracts. Of course, Eddie Hearn works with certain fighters on a fight-by-fight basis, on a handshake. But with many of his fighters, or most, he has a contract. And in that contract will typically be stipulations that say that the promoter has to provide the fighter with a certain number of fights or opportunities per year. And of course, the fighter has to agree that he will appear on a certain number of shows per year or whatever the case may be. If the promoter can't provide those opportunities, the fighter can say, well, you're in breach of contract. So again, promoters, for that reason, may have to go ahead and lose money on a show in order to get a guy out. And they may have guarantees in terms of purses. I think Bud Crawford had something like this with his deal with Bob Arum. And ultimately, I think that's why they had some kind of legal issue after they parted company. because Bud Crawford, according to Aaron, wasn't really bringing in a lot of revenue, but Aaron was still having to pay him what was originally contractually agreed. You see? So losing money on shows is a common thing in boxing, even in big time boxing. It's a common thing. But you do it for the reason I just described, and also, more commonly, to invest in a fighter. You lose money in the short term to gain money in the long term because you think that by investing in him now, by taking these losses on these shows now, you're helping to improve him and you're helping to build his profile and get him into a position where he can fight for titles, become a star, and so on. You know, Eddie Hearn's talked about losing money on Lawrence Okolie, for example. Said he's lost loads of money on several Lawrence Okolie shows. I'm sure he knew going into the show he was going to lose money. But he went ahead with the show anyway. So, you know, this idiot casual didn't understand that this is a common practice in boxing and in business in general. You have to take certain L's as an investment to get yourself a payoff further on down the line. So, yeah, Eddie Hearn addresses that. Going to be interesting to see what he does with regards to Buatsi. It would be crazy if Buatsi fought Pascal on BT on a Frank Warren show. If there isn't any better opportunity, maybe that will go ahead. But you have to figure that Eddie Hearn will be talking to Buatsi and trying to get him to go in a different direction. Whether Buatsi will want to is another matter. It all depends on whether he's being offered more money by Eddie Hearn to go in a different direction. If Eddie Hearn can't match the money that Buatsi would have got facing Pascal, and I think it would have been 60% against Pascal, and so the winning bid was it 900 and something thousand, just under $1 million? Let's call it $1 million for argument's sake. So 60% is 600 grand in, you know, US dollars. So is he going to get Buatsi a fight that's going to pay him more than 600 grand? He'll need to in order to make Buatsi feel comfortable about moving away from the Pascal fight. And also, he'll need to put Buatsi in a fight that is going to make him mandatory if he wins. Because that's what the Pascal fight would do. I guess the Callum Smith fight would do the same. Because Callum Smith is already mandatory, I believe, after he beat that French guy. So if he fights Buatsi, it will effectively be another eliminator, or will be another eliminator. So the winner again will be number one with that particular sanctioning body. So maybe that's the road Eddie Hearn will go down, and maybe that fight will pay Joshua Buatsi more than the 600 grand he would have got for fighting Pascal. So, and that's assuming they don't do it on pay-per-view, because that's the amount they've bid for the fight. If they did it on, you wouldn't imagine they'd do it on pay-per-view, but these days they're going OTT with pay-per-view. They just put, I mean, talk about DAZN's troubles. They just put a YouTuber on DAZN pay-per-view. I mean, that's unbelievable. They put a YouTuber on DAZN pay-per-view. DAZN wasn't supposed to primarily be a pay-per-view platform. It's supposed to only be for the huge fights. They're putting YouTubers on. It's just unreal. So, yeah, you wouldn't imagine that Buatsi Pascal would be pay-per-view on BT. But then again, Parker versus Joyce, is that really pay-per-view fair? They're putting that on pay-per-view? Who knows? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, particularly if you've seen this interview with Eddie Hearn. What's your take on what he said? Drop it all below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. not to mention a vast back catalogue of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, it's decentralized, and it's 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.